What is up, fellow funnel headers? Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. Today we are working on some spring projects, some spring maintenance projects with the 911. Speaking of spring, you would never know it because it is freaking frigid outside and you can probably hear the wind. It is super windy out. We're kind of in the midst of a cold front. Super awesome. It's supposed to get down to like 22 overnight and it was like 60 yesterday. So the project that I'm going to work on today is flushing the brake fluid in the 911, which Porsche recommends that you do once every 2 years. I actually did this on this car not quite 2 years ago, so it isn't technically really due yet. That being said, I do drive this car a lot and I drive it hard, which of course in that situation, they do recommend you do it more often. Also, quick aside, just so that you know, quick educational tip here. The reason for that, I mean, it seems so stupid, right? It's like it's not engine oil, it's not transmission fluid. Why would you change your brake fluid? Well, the reason for that is brake fluid is called a hydrophobic. I think the word's hydrophobic. It's a hydrophobic fluid. Basically, what that means is that it absorbs water. So, and of course, it's not on a regular basis exposed to water, but it, in a very minuscule way, it is exposed to humidity both during installation and during operation. Like the seals aren't perfect in the calipers all the time, so there's a small amount of exposure to humidity in the air. Now the reason that is bad is once water mixes into your fluid and you brake hard and often and you heat that fluid up, well then that water boils and evaporates, and then that creates air bubbles in your fluid. And what's worse than air bubbles in your fluid? Well, nothing, because then you lose your brakes completely. So, in order to keep the braking performance tip-top in the 911, we will flush the fluid. But another reason why I am flushing the brake fluid before the 2-year interval, not only because I drive it hard and often, is because this car is 20 years old this year. Again, I apologize for the wind. Holy crap, that is loud. And what's so important about this car turning 20 years old this year? Well, the soft brake lines on this car, the rubber brake lines that flex with the suspension and turn with the front wheels, those are also 20 years old. And given that, I say they've lived a good life, it's time to replace them. But I'm not just going to replace them with OEM soft lines, I'm actually replacing them with braided steel lines, which, if you don't know, in itself is a performance upgrade. Because when you hit the brake pedal, if you have rubber soft lines on your car, the rubber actually expands out just slightly under pressure. The braided steel avoids that expansion, at least in a much less way. So braided steel lines actually improve your brake pedal feel by quite a bit, therefore improving your braking performance. So let's get to it. Just really quick before we get started, in case you don't know, the supplies that we'll need for actually doing the brake fluid flush on the car are, well, first and foremost, we need a power bleeder. If you don't have one of these, you can get them on Amazon. I bought this one, I think it was on Amazon, but you can get them just about anywhere that sells automotive parts. Just make sure that you get the one that has the screw-on cap for German cars. I believe Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, Audi, I think Audi, they all use the common cap design. And of course, additionally, we'll need brake fluid itself. Porsche recommends .4 brake fluid. This particular brand and style is kind of the kitty's titties when it comes to brake fluid. I have 3 liters of it currently, just in case. I think that should cover me, but given that normally I would say maybe 2 is enough if you're doing a flush, but I have a third, just considering I'm doing the lines, so I'm kind of accounting for that extra little bit of brake fluid that will be required. Okay, now the car is in the air, as you can see. Wheels are off, so it is in hover car mode. And starting at the right rear, for no particular reason, other than this would be the order, at least in a left-hand drive car where the master cylinder is on the left-hand side of the car. This is the order that you would bleed the brakes in. So I'm just going to start with the right rear just for consistency's sake. As you can see here, this is the soft line. So we will take an 11mm wrench and loosen it here, And then again, further down here, which I can't get a very good camera angle of right now. Yep, down here. So, as expected, these are looking super ultra 20 years old. So it's definitely good that I'm doing these now. The process is going to be take an 11mm wrench, loosen at the hard line right there on either side. I do have a drip pan because, of course, once this comes loose, we will be dripping some fluid out. I'm going to begin by going around the car, cracking all of them, hopefully, and then we'll start replacing some lines. I did end up hitting these with some penetrating lube, PB Blaster. Of course, as you know, in this situation, you can't put a socket on it. You have to use the most useless tool of all time, a crescent wrench. And I was not about to try to round off these nuts. Of course, when you're in the general area of brakes, you do have to just be very careful you don't get it all over the brake hardware, because then your brakes won't work very well. Mounting points for the soft line are far enough away from the caliper and the rotor and the pads to where you can keep the overspray away from all the friction surfaces. But just be extra careful, and then keep like a paper towel on hand. So, and of course some brake clean. All right, I'm gonna let these soak for a little bit and then attempt to crack them yet again. I just got all of the nuts that secure the soft lines cracked loose. That was a bit of a stressful process. Several of them, actually 3 of the 8, were quite stubborn, and I had to hit them again with PB Blaster and let them soak for quite a while longer. The other thing that is absolutely key with these is make sure you have crescent wrenches that are like this style, that actually can grip on more sides of the nut than just this style, which is, it literally puts pressure points on either side of the nut and will very quickly round off your nuts. You don't want your nuts to be rounded off. I ended up having to resort to using this style for 2 of the 3 that were being stubborn. The last one, I just completely rounded it off and had to get the vice grips out. And you know it's a bad day when you're getting the vice grips out. I finally got it cracked, but oh my gosh, I was kind of livid. Anyway, we got all the nuts cracked. It's now time to jump into line replacement. So let's get to it. So here is the chassis side mount of the soft line going to the hard line on the chassis side. And then here is, at the bottom here, is the other side of the soft line, which goes on here. So just know, before doing any of this, this is quite a messy job. You will spill fluid, brake fluid, and you'll spill a good bit of it. And you will get it on you, most likely, which is not good, because it is actually a highly corrosive fluid, and you don't really want it on your skin at all, for starters. And then you need to be very, very careful to make sure you don't get it on your car's paint at all. So just as it's dripping, which, like I said, is inevitable, just make sure you control where it's going. Come on, thing. Okay. So you can see now it's loose. And it's kind of just free dripping. What I'm going to do is take my paper towel, just kind of hold this up. The caliper won't drip out too much, but it will drip some. loose. Yep, okay. Got it off. Again, be careful because we're open and dripping. So I'm just gonna drop this line down in my oil pan. Don't need it anymore. This is gonna be the frustrating part. So shove the new line through. Hopefully be able to get the freaking threads started some. Okay, got them. I'm gonna milk this for all it's worth. Turn it as much as I freaking can to get that threaded. Alright, got the chassis side started. Of course, it's not in completely. Now, to get this side. But yeah, that's how to do it. You just do the same thing on all four corners of the car. Of course, each corner has a different layout as far as placements of like the chassis side mount and the caliper mount. But same process. So yeah, just do it like that. Make sure you don't lose too much fluid in the process. And next we will bleed the brakes. Okay, so it is now time to bleed the brakes. Of course, reason being, one, because we would have done this anyway because of maintenance, but two, by adding the soft lines, we have introduced a lot of air into the system because we've cracked open the system on all four corners of the car. Of course, you can do it the traditional way where you have someone in the driver's seat applying pressure to the brake pedal. That is sort of a more inefficient way. You don't get as much of a flush effect. So that's why we're using this power bleeder. What this does is it applies pressure to the brake system. Of course, here's your brake fluid reservoir, and then your master cylinder is right behind it. It applies pressure to it, and then whenever you crack one of the bleeder valves open, it will then, that pressure will then push fluid through, pushes the old fluid through, and then it backfills it with new fluid as you bleed. So you are literally flushing and replenishing the fluid all in one fluid motion. A little bit of background on how to do that. We will apply about 1 bar of pressure. We'll pump this up to about 1 bar of pressure, and then we work. So on left-hand drive cars, you have the master cylinder on the left-hand side of the car, and you bleed farthest away and from the master cylinder, and then move closer. So left-hand drive, we will start with the right rear corner, then left rear, right front, left front, in that order. It's the opposite for left-hand or right-hand drive cars. Now, of course, Porsches do have 2 bleeders on each caliper because they're a Brembo caliper. They're a fixed caliper as opposed to a floating caliper. So there's bleeder valves on each side of the rotor of the caliper, and so we will apply the same principle to that, and we'll start from the furthest out bleeder and work in. And finally, another benefit of having the power bleeder is that obviously we just opened up the brake system on all 4 corners of the car. So this is the first time that these new components will be under pressure. So once I apply some initial pressure to the system, I'm going to go around, check for leaks anywhere. Once I see there's no leaks, then we will proceed to bleed the system. But this allows us to actually put the brake system under pressure before driving it. Of course, we don't want to be out on the road and discover that there's some leak or some opening in the brake system. That would be terrible and catastrophic. So this allows us to check that before actually driving it. Okay, so I will do that. I'll pressurize, and then we will start the bleeding process. So just get some sort of, cup, something to hold your old brake fluid. And then I always use this like rubber tubing. I don't even remember where I got it, like Amazon or something. And then usually you can fit that over the nipple. Yes, I said nipple. So you got to pop the little rubber cap off, fit your hose over. Of course, before you do that, you got to put your wrench on because you'll need to loosen once your hose is already on there. So you'll see what I mean in a second here if you're not familiar, but basically once we crack the bleeder valve like so, now you can start to see fluid coming out. And kind of as expected, it looks pretty good because like I said, I didn't do this too terribly long ago. I'm actually surprised. I think we'll probably end up getting some heavy bubbles soon here because obviously all of our bubbles are from the soft line side. So they have to work their way through the caliper. But yeah, you want to look for basically like the fluid to be as close to your the color that you saw when you poured it into your power bleeder. Make sure it's as close to that color as possible. And then look for any bubbles as you're flushing it, of course. Bleed it until you don't see bubbles anymore. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when I was pressure checking, I did not see any leaks anywhere, and the power bleeder was holding pressure, so I think we're good. But I'm gonna continue to monitor it as we go. Aside from that, just gotta keep doing this until all the bubbles are out. Okay guys, well, I just got back from test driving the car after doing the brake line replacement and also the full brake fluid flush. And as expected, the braided steel lines do in fact help brake pedal feel by quite a bit. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's awesome. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. Hopefully it was informative. If you liked it, please do me a huge favor and drop a like. That really helps out the channel a lot. I would really appreciate it. Or a comment. I try to do my best to respond to all comments on my videos, so yeah, feel free to reach out and say hey. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to Fun Ahead TV, and I will see you guys next time.